Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Guided Path webinar. My name is Cindy McDonald, and I'm so glad to welcome you to today's webinar. I'm very excited to have our guest speaker, Frank Palmasani, with us today. If you've attended other of our webinars, you'll know that this is a great professional development opportunity for you and for your colleagues. We will be sending an email with links to this presentation that Frank is going to share with you today. So be watching your email for links and information about today's presentation. I also want to draw your attention to the question box that's on your GoToMeeting dialog box. Use this to interact with Frank and myself today. My name is Cindy McDonald. I am the founder and president of Guided Path. I'm also a college counselor who's been doing college and career counseling for over 20 years. Use this question box to put in questions, comments, and we will be saving time at the end so that you will be able to ask questions. And if we don't have time to address all the questions, we'll be putting together an FAQ for you. So if you would just type something into the question box right now, that way you'll know where it is and it'll be front and center for you as we go through our presentation. Again, thank you for being here today. So I see many comments coming in. This is great. Keep looking and putting comments into your question box. As you're doing that, I want to introduce our guest speaker today. This is so excited. I met Frank Palmasani at a conference in Chicago last year. I've read his book, looked at his information. He's going to share his philosophy and everything that goes behind his financial fit concept. He is also the author of Right Price, Right Fit, and really has a lot to share that can help you with your families in conquering college costs. And Frank, I'm going to turn the time over to you, but I also want you to share a little bit about your background and how you got into this with your audience. So thank you, Frank. And now I'm turning the time over to you.
Of years doing that, spent years in the college level, and during that period of time in 1985 when I was working on the college level, I did my first presentation on this idea of college costs. And I've been doing these presentations ever since, but really it has been a evolution of ideas. You know, in the early years when we talked to people about helping them through college costs, it typically was informing about the financial aid system, and in that process getting the file forms. But today it's so much more involved. And so what we're going to do is spend some time today on the idea of paying for college without excessive debt, with the hope that I can give you some ideas that would help families save thousands of dollars in college costs. So I want to start that discussion by really talking about the history of income levels in the United States. And as you look at this chart, what you see, going back to the 60s really, is that if you looked at every income category, we see tremendous increases in terms of standard of living. But if you look at it from the year 2000 till today, you see a very different picture. And other than the top 1-2% of our income earners, what you see is that people's standard of living has actually decreased, and in some cases decreased quite markedly. Now, at that same time, if we were to look at increases of college costs, now this particular slide represents college costs of Midwest states, but it could really be any states across the country. You see that during the same period where we had income slides, we had major increases in college costs. So indeed, what has that left us with? Well, we know that sticker prices are incredibly high. We also know that we haven't received much support on the federal and state level to indeed deal with those increases over the last 15 years or so. So the residue of all of this has been increased borrowing. We know that the student today borrows more than $25,000 on their own behalf to support education, college education, and the parent on behalf of that student is borrowing about $35,000. So you have about $60,000 wrapped up into family debt. Now, obviously, what might bother you is that number, but what really bothers me is that it is an average. So that means that there's a significant amount of people borrowing well beyond that, literally putting themselves in financial jeopardy. So to start this discussion, what I'd like to do is to center on the approach a family would use in the college search and eventual college selection process. And the approach that we attempt to describe really revolves around this diagram. And it's the integration of the three areas of fit that we believe makes the most sense. So if we were talking to only a group of students, they would probably understand most of the ideas that are connected with academic fit. That the students should find colleges that have the majors or programs of study that they're interested in. That the students should find those majors that have the kind of quality that they're interested in, and that the students would be able to look at those colleges where they could be academically successful. Certainly, they would understand the idea of feel. Students are very, very tuned in to the idea that they want to be comfortable at places. They want to find the right places socially. They want to find the right places, in some cases, spiritually. Have it be the right location. But students typically are not experienced enough to understand the impact that financial fit has on this entire process. And so this is where we really believe parents have to get involved and get involved early. So how do we describe financial fit? We see financial fit as the capacity for a family to match what they can afford, and that should be done in, by the way, a systematic way, how they can assess their affordability systematically and be able to match that, not with the sticker price of a school, but with the net price. So when all of these ideas come together, now you have the basket of schools that we consider to be the best fits, leading to, title my book, the right college at the right price. So I want to start that discussion by talking about the notion of reasonable student borrowing versus excessive borrowing. Here's what we know. Bucket number one. Every student, every family gets to reduce their sticker price of the school simply by filing the document that we call Fafsa. Because simply by filing the document, regardless of a family's income or assets, every student can borrow. They can borrow $5,500 in freshman year, $6,500 in sophomore year, and $7,500 in each of junior and senior years. If they go a fifth year, another $4,000. So assuming that a student were to borrow the maximum, over a 10-year period of time of repaying that loan, what we know, given the current interest rates, is that that repayment would be less than $300 a month. So maybe the conversation that a parent should have with the student is, we want you, the student, to have some skin in the game in this process. Here is a method for them to be financially involved in their own education, but this is reasonable borrowing. Once you get involved in borrowing more dollars, now you talk about repayment that is $500, $600, $700 a month, and now we're talking about putting that student in real financial jeopardy. So, clear conversation from the beginning, reasonable borrowing versus excessive borrowing. Second piece of conversation, why should parents encourage students to work on a college campus? Obviously, we're not talking about working enough to earn what it would take to pay for college, but working enough to earn the amount of money it would take them so that they don't have to call mom and dad and ask for that extra $100 a month or a week for spending money. Just taking care of those miscellaneous expenses that occur on a college campus. And then another way for them to have skin in the game is to encourage the parent, to encourage the child, to spend some time making some money in the summer, and then maybe taking on the responsibility of books so that, the student does research on getting books online or getting books borrowed or some way that the student feels that they're involved in their own education financially. Then, first assignment that I would like to give every parent in the beginning phase of this process, not after the college decision has been done, but are in the beginning, is that they actually sit down and go through their financial position to determine what is reasonable borrowing. Now, we already heard that the average parent is borrowing $35,000. So is that right for this particular family? Should it be less? Can they not borrow at all? Or can it be more? Every family's got to make that determination. Okay, then second little piece of homework. Every family needs to go to a Department of Education website called Fafsa Forecaster. Now later on we're going to show you our website, and we're going to link this so that it's really easy to get to. But once the family goes to this website, they will indeed answer the questions and will receive from that questionnaire one's approximate EFC number. Now EFC stands for Expected Family Contribution, but it is very important that a family not misunderstand what that means. We're going to talk about what it actually means in a minute, but it's more important to know what it doesn't mean. This is not what they are expecting you to pay to college. This is not your net price at any institution. It is simply a number that is going to determine eligibility for programs. So, what's the importance of the number? Well, let's see if indeed the number would allow for certain eligibility. Now, if the number comes out very low, 6,000 or lower, then the potential eligibility exists for the federal grant that we call Pell. This is a very, very low EFC number, however. Some states tie their state grant programs into EFC numbers. Here in Illinois, if the EFC number is less than 9,000 and the student attends a school in Illinois, then our state grant program, which happens to be called MAP, may be able to kick in and be another bucket that can be used by the college to reduce that sticker price. And then, of course, because these are very low numbers, if the EFC number is higher than 6,000, higher than 9,000, but if it's lower than the cost of a particular institution, it's very possible that that college could take some money from their need-based grant coffers and use that to reduce the sticker price. So the whole picture that we're trying to portray is how can a family get a sticker price reduced? They file a document, they can obtain student loan. They file a document and the student is aggressive enough, they can find a job on campus. They file the document, and if they have a real low EFC number, Pell Grant money. Maybe a low EFC number, perhaps state grant money. A lower EFC number than the cost of the institution, perhaps money from the college itself. Okay, then the next big assignment that I'm really giving parents or suggesting to parents is that they need to determine in a systematic way what they can actually afford to pay for college. You know, so many of the things that I've talked about in all of my seminars have changed. But if I were to ask families today or yesterday, years ago, this question, they would all give me the same answer. So how much do you actually think that you could afford to pay for college? Invariably, people tell me, well, here's what we have put aside in savings. But in actuality, we like to look at systematically assessing affordability in 4 areas. You know, many families today who pay for college will actually pay less in federal taxes because of the tax credit program. So here's an opportunity to transfer that tax credit savings into money used to pay for college. So many families will tell me today they do not have any money available to pay for college out of cash flow. But if they really thought about it, they are spending some of their cash flow today on expenses on their children or child living with them. When that child goes away to college, those expenses could be transferred. Typically, there is money that a family has available out of cash flow. And then if they have savings put away for college, great. And again, this notion of reasonable borrowing. So to help families actually determine what we call an affordability threshold, we have actually designed a questionnaire. And we're going to show you that questionnaire at the end of the presentation, available on our website. The other pieces of information that are so important for a family to acquire is the student's test score and their grade point average. So when we talk about composite test score, we're talking about the ACT or the SAT. So in some cases, a family will have that information. In some cases, a student will have to use other tests to actually assess or predict what that SAT score is going to be or ACT score is going to be. But why are these data points important? Well, these data points are important. The three key data points being the EFC number, the composite test score, and the GPA. They're important because of the Department of Education initiative that we call net price calculators. Now, to understand the value of net price calculators, you really need to go back to the year 2007. Remember 2007, 2008. The economists told us we were in a period of time that was the worst economically since the Great Depression. Well, the Department of Education in that year knew they had a problem. And their problem was all of those initial diagrams that we showed you when we started. Increasing college costs and decreasing earning power. So what the department did was they decided that they had to push forward two ideas. The first was greater college pricing transparency. Not sticker price transparency, but net price transparency. And then the second idea was they had to find a way to get this net price to families early on. They then came up with the notion that every college in the country had to have a calculator on their website by October of 2011. So now every college has it. Indeed, these calculators are called net price calculators. So using net price calculators and using this idea, what I did was I decided to create a different way to do a college search. Not do the college search the typical way, which centers on the student's preferences. Because the typical college search says, what size do you want? What location do you want? What major do you want? What extracurriculars do you want? What price do you want? And it puts it in a funnel. Well, the problem with that method is the price component used in that funnel is sticker price. But people don't pay sticker price. So it's really a meaningless element. But if the element is excluded, now it's like looking at the student's preferences for colleges in a financial vacuum. Ultimately, those funnel methods, those software programs, will produce colleges that are very much like one another. Now, my research has shown, looking at award letters over the last 25 years or so, is that colleges who are like one another produce prices that are like one another. That doesn't help families. In the beginning phase, to try to find financial fits, families need to see price points that are very much different from one another. So thus, I created these categories, 7 primary college categories and 2 backups. So here's the theory. If I know what I can afford and I know how to learn how to use net price calculators, and I then look at example colleges in each of these 7 categories, let's assume that I find no colleges that fit us financially. What do? Do I simply give up? Do I say, okay, college is so expensive that we just have to borrow whatever it takes? I would say no to that. I would say before a family makes that decision, they should consider 2 backup options. One of the backups is to realize that a major cost in college today has nothing to do with the educational experience in the classroom, and it has nothing to do with the degree at the end of that experience. It's the living experience. Now, I'm all for the living experience on a college campus, but that cost is typically $8,000 to $13,000 more per year for the family. And so if that cost puts a family over their threshold, puts them in a position of excessive borrowing, my idea is, why not look at the colleges that are in your geographic area and have the student continue to live at home and save that extra room and board cost. Now here's the other option, the other backup. Let's assume that in the analysis, a family has affordable options, but they want a student to go to a particular college that is not affordable to them over a 4-year period of time, a certain type of institution, because they want that student to get that degree from that type. Well, if you really want that, why not cut those costs in half? Why not use the community college in the first 2 year, transfer to that institution, and potentially make it an affordable 2-year process rather than 4-year process? Okay, let's disregard the backups for a second. Now let's center on a clear idea of what these 7 categories represent. So the first piece of terminology that we want to make sure families are aware of is this idea of flagship. Every state has a flagship state school, certainly. Many states have one, some states have more than one. You know, we live here in Illinois, and our flagship is the University of Illinois, Urbana. But if I go to Michigan, we have Michigan State. I go into Indiana, it's Purdue and Indiana University. But we get the idea, right? There's a premier state-supported institution, at least one, in most every state. So therefore, I've got 2 categories. I've got 2 different price points. I've got the state school that's called the flagship in my state, and the flagships out of state. And then, of course, we have many other state schools. And we're not trying to demean these schools by any means, but we had to give them a name. And so if we have a flagship, then we have a number of non-flagships. 2 more price points: non-flagship in-state, non-flagship out-of-state. Then 3 different types of private institutions. The highly selective privates. We all know who they are. These are the Ivy Leagues, Notre Dame, Northwestern, University of Chicago. These institutions really have maintained the pristine idea of what the financial aid system is all about. They don't give out money for merit-based purposes. They focus giving out resources for need. And they're the institutions that have a better chance of meeting 100% of the need. But they're few and far between, and it's very difficult to get into these types of institutions. And then you have the mid-sized privates. This is the smaller line of private schools. Schools that are about 7,000 students or more. They're not the highly selective, and they're not in this small private or traditional private category. These are schools like Creighton and University of Dayton and Marquette, St. Louis University, those mid-sized privates. And then the traditional privates. Every state has a large number of these. As a matter of fact, this category is the largest of all the categories. What you're going to see is if you use net price calculators of example colleges, you would see typically different price points, 7 different categories of prices that would evolve from this process. Okay, my next slide suggests that a student should take multiple tests. Now, why would a student want to do this? Well, we know that for a great majority of schools, they're going to use the EFC number, the test score, and the GPA as the variables to reduce that sticker price. However, most colleges will take the best composite test if you have taken multiple tests. And some colleges will even superscore. Take the best subtests, add those, average it, and create a new composite. So there seems no disadvantage at all for a student to take multiple ACTs or SATs. Here's another variable that I think can be helpful as a student attempts to reduce their sticker price, a family attempts to reduce the sticker price. We know that there are other reasons why colleges give money to families, but it can't be obtained, it can't be found out on a calculator. So what I typically ask families is, how many people in here think that their son or daughter possesses giftedness that cannot be determined by a test score and a GPA? And of course everybody raises their hand. And it's true. But we need to share that with colleges. Colleges need to know if the student is gifted in art, music, theater, if they're an athlete, if they're a leader, if they're a volunteer. And how can I best do this? I encourage every student to develop a professional-looking resume and hand that resume to every college representative they speak to, developing a relationship with that person. You know, colleges today are telling us that the reps are advocates in some situations to try to garner more money for the students and families that they're working with. It's important that that student take that extra step. You know, there's another bucket. You know, we're talking about all these buckets, ways that sticker price can be reduced, the student loan, the campus employment, the need-based money from the college itself, the academic scholarship money that you see in a net price calculator, this extra merit money that could come because the student has this giftedness in these areas, Pell Grant dollars that could be a bucket of money, state grant dollars, need-based grant money from the college, all these areas. And then there's something outside the system, independent scholarships that could potentially be available to students. The problem is we live in just a wide capacity for students and families to learn about opportunities. We have this database that's unlimited, but without an organizational system, students can get overwhelmed with all of the independent scholarship options available to them. So what I do is I encourage all students and families to process any scholarship they see into one of three areas. Is it a local scholarship? Is it regional? Is it national? By local, what I mean is there are certain scholarship organizations, certain entities in a community that always offer money to students from that particular high school. Make sure that the student is accessing on top of those opportunities, because that's the least competitive pool. Students will only be competing with their classmates. And then, of course, there are scholarships that are from the local area. They're regional in nature. And maybe it's students that get access because they live in a particular county or a region. Those are the next layer. But when you get into scholarship opportunities where you know you're competing with everyone in the country, realize this is very difficult, very challenging. I'm not saying impossible, but sometimes industrious and persistent students can get money from those areas. But you need a game plan when you approach these independent scholarships so you can filter through the options and really effectively manage your time. All right, now we need to get ourselves organized financially, right? Because in senior year, after October 1st, if a student is going to apply to those highly selective schools, they need to file the CSS profile. And of course, all of us, no matter what schools the student is considering, need to file the free application for federal student aid after January 1st of that student's senior year. So indeed, what does that FAFSA do? Well, the FAFSA is the official document that allows this EFC to be processed. So if I apply to multiple colleges, do I file multiple FAFSAs? No. The student files the one FAFSA, the parent with the student files the one FAFSA, and lists all of those colleges. So then the colleges, in turn, can receive this official EFC number. So think about it from the college's perspective. What will they have at that point in time? They'll have the EFC number, they'll have the test score, and they'll have the GPA. Well, how will they have the test score and GPA? Because the student will have had to apply to the school, and that transcript and those test scores will have to be sent. And as I said earlier, these are the three data points that the colleges need. When they have those three data points, they can determine the award letter, they can determine all of the buckets that the student can receive that will allow the sticker price to be reduced and thus be called a net price. Now, people say, when should I file the FAFSA? I like to think that families should file the FAFSA right after January 1, even though the tax return from the year before is not complete. We know that's the information that has to be used in a tax return, but rather than waiting for that tax return to be complete, we recommend that they file and then go back in after they've completed taxes and do the updates. And I might point out, as the slide indicates, don't miss that question that asks for the amount of money paid in federal taxes in that year prior. Now, they're not asking for what the refund was, they're saying how much was actually paid in federal taxes. There's an easy way for this to be done. It's called the IRS data retrieval system, where you can actually link your tax return to the FAFSA itself. Once a family files the FAFSA, Here's another possibility, another way that sticker price can be reduced, and that is for that family to develop an appeal strategy. I'm going to show you later a website that we created, and on this website we have 21 videos that really talk about everything anybody would want to know about this process of getting their college costs reduced. One of those videos is one that I highly encourage people to watch, and that is this development of an appeal strategy. Because you have to understand that the FAFSA is simply a financial snapshot. It is not a comprehensive look at a family's financial perspective. How do you get this comprehensive look? You need to go through the appeal process, and that appeal process goes directly to the colleges. It doesn't go into the FAFSA system. The elements of appeal, some of the elements of the appeal are listed on this particular slide, but there's others. So there's opportunities to really state your case directly to the college. Okay, one of the other elements that I think needs to be talked about is that, you know, when families think about parent borrowing, of course they're wondering, well, what loan options are available? So I have a video on the website called the 10 loan options, where I go through all of these possibilities. I might point out that there is one that typically is presented to families by the colleges, and that's the middle one. That's the parent loan to undergraduate students. But families need to know that because the college presents a plus loan as a method, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best loan for that parent to embark upon. I think parents should study all of the options that we call the 10 loan options before they make a decision on the way they're going to borrow, if they're going to borrow at all, to support their son or daughter as they're going off to college. All right, so after this is done, sometime after January 1, now we're into senior year, sometime in March or April, families will actually receive these official award letters. These are the official ways that you're able to determine net price. You unofficially learn your net price through your net price calculators, and you're creating your examples, you're creating your differences in terms of net price. But the student is applied to the 4, 5, 6 schools, and they're going to be receiving these official award letters, usually in March or April. But you know, families have until May 1 to make their final choice. And I always encourage families never to decide too soon, and make sure you know what you're looking at. This is an example of an award letter from the University of Portland. Now let's look at this particular award letter. The University of Portland has a sticker price. That sticker price is $47,460. That's tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, personal and miscellaneous expenses, and transportation. Now, if you look at the last line item of this award letter, it says total financial aid offered, $47,460. Without the family understanding an award letter, they might think, oh my gosh, we're going to the University of Portland for free. But a closer examination of the award letter, you will notice that $19,860, let's call it 20K, is in the form of a parent plus loan. Clearly, a plus loan is not financial aid. It should never be viewed as financial aid. So the out-of-pocket cost, the net price for this family is $20K or so. Now, that may or may not be affordable, but certainly it is not going to the University of Portland for free. All right, so here's a topic that often comes up, a topic that I write about in my book, and Cindy, you'll know this, and certainly many people out there also know, I'm not the only one that has ever written about the notion of negotiation. Many blogs talk about this, many books have been written, and there's topics involved. Colleges are negotiating today. And as I tell families all the time, if you read that and you picked up the phone and said, oh, do you negotiate? I suspect you wouldn't get very far. So my approach in this area is that a family should always present themselves in an honest fashion. Here's the example. Let's say you're down to 4 colleges. College A, B, C, and D. College B is affordable, C is affordable, D is affordable, A is not. But of course, A is the first choice school. It's the school that the student really wants to go to and the parents want that student to go to. But A is 2, 3, maybe even as much as 5,000 beyond that family's affordability. Why not attempt to make an appointment with that school and start out with an honest conversation? And that honest conversation is that we have systematically looked at affordability. We didn't just take a number out of the hat, but we actually processed cash flow, tax credits, savings, and reasonable borrowing. We came up with this figure. We do have other colleges where our net price actually is affordable. Your college, however, which is where the child wants to go and we want to send them, is slightly beyond their affordability. Is there anything we missed? Is there anything you can do to help us in this situation? And I think when approached honestly, families would be surprised at the number of colleges that are willing to work with them. All right, at this point in time, what I want to do is spend a few minutes talking about some of the opportunity that we have in the Financial Fit program. As you can see, Financial Fit, which is the online program that we created, is housed on the collegecountdown.com website. So we're not going to really navigate around College Countdown, but we are going to attempt to get right to Financial Fit and allow you to see some of the features and benefits that are available in Financial Fit that directly relate to what we've been talking about so far. So once a family registers and logs in, they're actually going to go to the My Tools bar and click Financial Fit. And when you do that, you'll see 6 bulleted items: affordability, college fit, college comparison, financial aid documents, paying the bill, and award letters. This is really a nuts and bolts, A to Z process of learning through videos everything one would want to know about this entire system. What I'm going to do, however, is to show you only 3 aspects of Financial Fit. The first is the link to Fafsa Forecaster. As you know, I mentioned it was very important that you learn your EFC number. So in bullet number 2, you can quickly go to Fafsa Forecaster, run through that process, and get yourself in a position where you know your EFC number. Once you know your EFC number, I would like you to go to the College Affordability Calculator. This is that 10-item questionnaire that I talked about, an ability, an opportunity for a family to really get to a position where they could determine what they can actually afford to pay for college, but do it in a systematic way by answering the 10 questions about tax credit, cash flow, savings, and reasonable borrowing that they'll see on the screen. Once they answer those questions, this affordability number will obviously change. At the end of that process, they will have a systematic look at what they can actually afford. So now you know your EFC number and you know what you can afford. We want the student also, we want the family also to know the student's GPA and the student's test score, right? So then we're going to go to the Financial Fit College search. And using that threshold of affordability, we're going to walk over here to this Financial Fit search, and we're going to find the Financial Fit categories. And when we do that, what you're going to see on the screen here in a minute are all of the categories that we talked about, and over here on the right, you're going to be able to click a category, and in that click, be in a position where we're going to be able to see all of the colleges in that particular category. So when we do that, we're going to click the, there we go. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take some examples so that you know. Now, I'm an individual doing this from Illinois, but once a person registers, they'll register in that state, and their state will automatically come up. So you see the 7 categories that I've talked about. So I'm going to find the flagship state school in Illinois. That's easy. That's Urbana. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to every other category, and I'm going to pick up some college examples because I want a real good cross-section of opportunities for me to see different net prices. So you'll notice as I'm doing this, I come across something that says go to NPC. And when I see that, when I do that, what does NPC stand for? It is that college's net price calculator. So what I'm going to do is show you one net price calculator today, but with the idea that what a family would do is they would do a series of these so that they can create a chart for themselves of different net prices. So let's go to the Creighton University net price calculator. And when we do that, what we're going to see here is Creighton makes it very simple. They say, what is your EFC number? So let's say we have a family who has an EFC number of 14,000. Then they're going to ask what that GPA is out of a 4.0. So let's assume that it's a 3.7 out of a 4.0. And then they're going to say, all right, what is the test score? We'll use the ACT test as an example. I'm going to try to scroll down here if I can. Let me get to that ACT test. And then they'll give us this option of the test score. I'll put in a 27 and simply hit calculate. Now, very quickly, I get the net price for this particular family using those three parameters. Now, we know that any student can borrow $5,500 in freshman year. We don't need to be using that or looking at the what I call the results screen on these calculators. If you want to use the $5,500, you can subtract that from your price at any school. If you want to throw in a job at $2,500 or so, you can subtract that from your price at any school. So what we're focusing on is the sticker price, which is Creighton sticker price, minus the free money. So what the net price calculators are designed to do is create this compilation of free money. Is there Pell money? Is there state money? Is there need-based money? Is there scholarship money? All of that is combined. Thus, you have a net price at that institution. So you go back then to your financial fit grid, and you put in your results. And of course, you're going to do this for multiple colleges, which is going to allow you to determine, does that match what we can afford or does it not? Is it a financial fit or is it not? So that's how our financial fit search program works. If you combine this search with other methods of learning more about the academics of the institution, learning more about the field of the institution, now you have this integrated approach of exploring college options and making sure that families don't choose colleges that force them into excessive borrowing. So Cindy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Frank. And all of this fits together and helps families to understand and take things. And as Frank, as you've been talking, I'm thinking about how there's such a different language for the affordability, the college costs. The colleges have their own college ease. And what you've done and what we try to do in Guided Path is to help translate that into consumer language, the language, everyday you and I type of folk and the families that we work with speak. So that's one of the things we definitely try to do. So I'm going to switch and make myself the presenter so I can show how this connects to what we offer. And let's see. So you should, Frank, there we go. All right. So now everybody should start seeing our screen, and it has the College Affordability Shaper. So the approach that we've taken in Guided Path is an add-on or subsequent to what Frank has done in the financial fit. But within Guided Path, you can actually have families, they can go in and complete a financial aid survey. The name is the College Affordability Shaper, and it will actually show families what their estimated family contribution is. As Frank said, you've got to have that number. He has people go to the Fafsa Forecaster. We calculate our own through the College Affordability Shaper. We also calculate that institutional number, because in those different categories that colleges fall into, a lot of those colleges are using their own calculation, and it's known as the institutional methodology. Many of you are familiar with that. So we calculate an estimate of their federal calculation for EFC and their institutional, and you can actually see how much of it is coming from um, parent income, parent assets, so that a lot of times parents will say, oh, well, maybe I need to get rid of this asset, and it's really income that's generating a lot, or I need to have my student go to work. And so they can see how things interact. And that makes a big difference as they work with to have the information. And that's what this is all about. The webinar, the work Frank does, the work we do, the work you do as professionals is to be able to have the information so that families can make informed, conscientious decisions and find that best fit. And I love the diagram, Frank, that you showed with the 3 intersecting circles, because that's what it's all about. So once our families find their family contribution, then we actually have families categorized into one of 3 categories: the whole, the half and half, or the merit. And there are certain approaches that you take depending on where your family falls, and that leads to those 7 different categories. But we actually, as you're working with and looking for colleges that offer that extra money, the merit scholarships, all those different kinds of things, in our guided search, you can actually search for colleges by the financial aid size. What's the average financial aid award that the college gets? What's the average merit award? Average athletic award? What's the cost of attendance? So in order to fit into those different categories, if I can only afford the 15,000 to 30,000, then I can do a search to stick with that. And then the same thing for out of state. And then we've actually done the research for you and created lists of schools that have different scholarship awards, different categories. So if you want to know and stick to the schools that are private schools and only use the FAFSA, we have that list. What are the colleges that don't use the custodial parent? One of the questions was about divorced families. Well, that becomes a factor. So knowing that there are schools that don't use the non-custodial parent form, that's an important aspect. So with the guided path, you can do searches and pull up colleges that have this kind of information so that you can use this as you work with your students. And we can pull up we also have the FISC guide. And so you can pull up information and sort it by a lot of different things. As Frank talked about, the SAT, the ACT, we're all familiar with that and how pivotal and important that is. You can pull that into this as well. And, we also had, if you missed the webinar that Harlan did and talked about how important it is to have students pick a college with transition in mind as well, we've got that kind of information under social experience. So you can put all this information together and do a search and pull up a lot of different data to help you build that list. So here I have acceptance rates, the average financial award, the average merit award, and I can actually sort by this. So providing tools and for you, for your families and students you work with, so that you can work smarter, you can provide these tools and resources, have them available, being able to utilize your time in a way that helps families, serves those that you work with, and gives you time to do what you love to do, which is work with families. So if you have any questions, feel free. Frank, I know you have let's go back to your PowerPoint, and we'll show the links to the questions. And let's see if I can coordinate this to be able to show this so that you can see it. And there's, okay. But for us, for Guided Path, we would recommend join us for some other webinars so that you can, we're going to be finishing up this series on Can I Afford College? If you go to Guided Path, go to Resources, go to Professional Development. Our next one is going to be with Lynn O'Shaughnessy, and she writes for CBS Money Watch. She's the author of the College Solution blog, and she's going to be doing a session on simple ways to help families reduce college costs. She does a lot on merit scholarships and a lot of the different principles incorporated in a slightly different way that Frank, you have talked about today. So join us. If you missed the presentation, for example, I just did one last week on tackling the basics of financial aid. It's a PowerPoint that you can present to families and students. It uses a game format. It's very interactive. I explained in the webinar how you can bring in volunteers to help you present this. You can view that presentation. If you would like the actual PowerPoint, you can send an email to me and I will send it to you. We've done one on college affordability case studies. That presentation's available. And this presentation today is actually available already. We always put the presentations with links under Cindy's blog. And you can see that this is now available, and you'll be able to see the recording from this session as well. So go to our blog, gather information, participate. The webinars are always free. Share them with your other colleagues. And Frank, what email? How does someone get a hold of you? And then and then we're going to go to some of the questions that we have here for you. But how does someone reach you if they have a question or want to learn more about financial fit?
Palmasani@gmail.com.
Okay,
probably the easiest way. PALMASANI@gmail.com.
Perfect. 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 So you'll also receive an email, and I'll put Frank's contact information, my contact information in there so that if you have further questions, you'll be able to contact him directly. So let's go through a couple of questions here. And now is the time, if you have other questions that you want to ask, now is the time to ask the questions. All right. So one of the big questions here is about your program itself. And is there a cost to it? How does that work?
Right. If you go to the College Countdown website, you'll see that there are a number of opportunities for different programs, books in the bookstore, and other programs that can be purchased. So currently, the program is a purchasable item. I think it's priced out at a little less than $50. We're working on some other opportunities in the future involved with sponsorship and so forth, but right now it is a program that is available through the College Countdown website for purchase.
Perfect. And I've pulled that up on the screen so that everyone can see. So it's collegecountdown.com, and when you go to the front page, it shows you the costs. All right. Now, what about divorced parents? Frank, how have you found, what principles or things have you found that work well for your divorced parents?
So federal methodology is very clear here, Cindy, and that is the family where the child lives most of the time is the definition used to determine who should file the document. So let me do it through an example. Let's say that I was divorced and not remarried, and my daughter lived with me more than 6 months during the last 12-month cycle. The income and the assets that I would record would be mine and my daughter's, not my daughter's mother. However, if I did remarry, then I would record mine, my new spouse, and my daughter's, and again, not my daughter's mother. So families often ask about who claims the child on a tax return.
Mm-hmm.
Federal methodology is not interested in who claims the child on a tax return. They're interested in where the child lives most of the time. Now, you talked earlier about institutional methodology, and I noticed on your website you have this capacity to filter out this concept of non-custodial parent. So we know that if a school mandates the use of the CSS profile as a supplement to FAFSA, because they're using that to determine what they're going to do with their own money, their own institutional resources, they certainly have the right to ask anything. And so you have some colleges that are going to be out there looking for non-custodial parent information, and some colleges that are not. So you have to differentiate that question and say, what does federal methodology want, and what does an individual college want as it relates to the CSS profile. So the safe thing is that the great majority of schools are FAFSA only, and thus if you understand how federal methodology views this custodial parent, then you can pretty much, for most situations, be able to plan accordingly.
Now, do you know, are there certain student loans where the family, in order to manage their resources, they can have the students take out the loans, and then after the student graduates, that they can then pay them back in, without prepayment penalty, like if they want to do it in one or two sums? Are there is that information?
Good question. Good question. So the loans that I was talking about in my presentation used to be called Stafford. Sometimes they're still referred to as Stafford. It's the proper terminology now is the direct loan program. So in that particular loan program, what you basically have are the subsidized portion and the unsubsidized portion. Now, the reason I don't talk much about that any longer is because there is a desire on the part of some members of Congress to eliminate the concept of subsidized. So I don't know what the future of subsidized student loans are going to be like. But in any regard, whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized, and let me explain that. A subsidized loan is one where the interest while the student is in college is not accruing. So theoretically, the federal government is actually paying the interest on the loan while the student's in college. In an unsubsidized student loan, of course, that interest accrues. But whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized, that repayment doesn't need to begin until 6 months after graduation. The standard method of repayment is 10 years monthly. However, we also have another method of repayment called the income-based repayment method, where if a person didn't have the resources, the student, and by the way, these are written in the student's name, the only entity that has to repay this is the student. The student is the only one signing the promissory note. So the parent has no legal obligation to repay. But if the student doesn't have the capability of handling that monthly payment over a 10-year period of time, they can choose the income-based repayment. That idea is if you don't have a large enough income, then you would pay 10% of that income. And of course, the amount you would pay would then float from year to year as your income changes. Now, on the other hand, if the question relates to other types of student loans, now we're talking about the private student loan market. You're talking about the big players like Wells Fargo, Discover Bank, a company used to be called Sallie Mae that just recently changed their name. Of course, many other companies. Though that private lender market is such now that you're really talking about a floating interest rate situation. You're talking about terms and conditions that move from lender to lender. But most often, when students go to the private loan market, they are doing it because they've exhausted all they can get in the direct loan and they need more money. That market demands typically a cosigner. So usually it's a parent having to examine whether or not they're willing to cosign on a loan like that. What I do is I try to differentiate all these options in that video that I call the 10 loan options, because that alternative, supplemental, or private student loan is one of those 10 possible ways that families can fund their education.
Perfect. So one of the other questions is where does at the very beginning, you talked about different statistics and data. And one of the questions was, where did your numbers come from? And this is from John, where do the loan figures come from?
Most of that information came from iPads,
Okay.
information that's shared on the college level. Some of the income information really came from, the income sources that we have, IRS sources and things of that nature.
Okay. So, and for those of you and most of you know what iPad's data is, but you can pull up all sorts of data. It's amazing how comprehensive and versatile the data is that you can pull up. And I often just go there and create my own reports just to get information. And it's the same information that's on the College Navigator as well. Well, we are out of time. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. And as I mentioned, please join us for next upcoming webinars on Can I Afford College? We're also going to be starting a new series this spring, working with different populations. We're going to have a webinar about working with international students, with transfer students, and with veterans. And then we also offer best practices webinars. We've had great success with this on engaging your students. How do you engage a sophomore? How do you engage 8th and 9th graders? I started a 2-part series on engaging juniors. We've had the first one. The second section is next week. Always, these are recorded. So if you want some ideas about how to engage your students using an online tool, so we've incorporated how do you use Guided Path to engage your students. This has been a very popular series. We've even had colleges attending this, so feel free to pass this on to other colleagues as well. Everyone have a great day. Frank, thank you very much. Thank you, Michelle. I know you're there in the background. Thank you, everyone. I know I have people attending from all over the world, staying up late at night or getting up early in the morning. So we look forward to seeing you at another webinar. There is a little survey that will pop up right after this. Please take the time to fill that out. It really helps us to be able to increase and improve the quality of our webinars. Everyone, this concludes our webinar today. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.